Yeah, thank you so much, Governor. We really appreciate you joining us this morning. We wanted to just talk at the beginning, kind of 30,000 foot, the big focus, obviously, reopening the economy with each state. What's your current timeline, and how confident are you that once things start to open up, you're not going to have a pullback?
Well, I think that a pullback, we've got to be nimble enough to be able to measure and to acknowledge, every time you open up a different sector of the economy, you run the risk of having a spike, and we've got to watch it closely. We've got to have the testing and the tracing, and we have to have all of that mechanism. And if we do have to pull back, we have to be able to pull back a little bit. What we want to avoid is a second spike. And I think that's what, every governor who's listening to their epidemiologists and their healthcare experts is, saying virtually the same thing, is that we have to be, look at this as a dial, not a switch, not on and off, but like as a dial that we can increase or that we can decrease if necessary. So right now in Michigan, we had the strictest stay home, stay safe policy in the nation. And last week I loosened it a little bit. This week, I'm going to lay out the criteria with which we're using to assess the inherent risk of a particular sector of our economy, the protocols necessary to bring down that risk, and to start to move that dial a little bit as we continue to ramp up on the testing and tracing components.
Is that, when you talk about dial, right? Like I understand what you're saying and it makes sense to me, but the kind of wording that's been used so much is reopen. And so people kind of, I think, are ready to break free. They've been in quarantine. How do you kind of make sure that Michiganders know, like, yeah, we're trying this out, but we may have to pull back a little bit on certain areas if there are spikes or if issues kind of arise? Do you think the public is ready for that?
Well, I think it's through, consistently explaining. I think that I'm paying close attention, you're paying close attention, and certainly there are a lot of people who are really invested. We're home, we're watching the news, but some who aren't. And I don't want to make any assumption that people really understand the threat of a second spike and what that would mean. I can confidently say, while we're not unanimous on a lot of things, I hope and I believe we are all unanimous that we don't want to be in a second stay home, stay safe posture, because we've got a lot more people dying and our healthcare system is at the brink again. We don't want that to happen. I don't think any of us does. But we all have to really understand the necessity of the mindful, data-driven engagement as we build up the public health side as well.
Governor, you said you're going to lay out tomorrow some of the data from which you're making these decisions on certain sectors of the economy. I wonder if you could preview that a little bit for us about how you're going to explain in the short order different sectors of the economy and the propriety of loosening some of those restrictions.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of groups that I've been working with. I'm fortunate, and I think every state has got some wonderful leaders on the medical side as well as on the business side. And we have reached out and organized a couple of different recovery councils. One, of course, is made up of our finest healthcare leaders, from the people that run the big health systems in Detroit to the University of Michigan, who is helping us score risk associated with different sectors of our economy, and business leaders who have a footprint, a global footprint. You know, we've got the big three. We've got a lot of great businesses in Michigan that have footprints in different parts of the globe and have gone through this, whether it's a plant in Italy or in China. We have got business leaders here in Michigan that have that experience. So we're building a lot of the work around assessing what the risk is in different sectors of our economy. I'll be talking a bit about that today with leaders from both of those groups in my press conference this afternoon. And I would anticipate in the coming days, if our trajectory of hospitalizations continues to go down and our ability to test continues to go up, that we will go into the next low risk category. And that might include some construction, for instance. It might include some additional outdoor enterprises that are currently forbidden from proceeding. So these are a couple of the areas that I think would be the lowest risk areas that we might start to engage. We also have to look regionally. Different parts of our state don't have COVID-19 pressure the way that other parts do. They also don't have the kind of hospitals able to meet a need if a spike happened. And so all of these factors go into the inherent risk, and that's what will be driving decisions of who comes online when.
There's obviously been protests in Michigan that have been reported on and in other states with folks just frustrated about having to shelter in place and other restrictions that have been put out there. You recently, as you said, eased some of those restrictions. It sounds like you're going to be maybe taking some other steps later this week. But how do you respond to critics that say you went too far? And are you concerned about any political repercussions, that could come from this frustration?
No, I'm not. I'm making the decisions based on what the best policy is to save lives. That's it. That's all that's driving the decisions. I mean, we've got to slowly and smartly re-engage sectors of our economy, but everything I've done has been about saving lives. And frankly, Michigan had a uniquely tough experience with COVID-19. We are the 10th most populous state in the country. And for a long time, we had the third highest number of positive COVID-19 cases and the third highest rate of death. That's precisely why it was important for us to take these most aggressive, steps in the nation. It's something that has absolutely contributed to us flattening that curve. The thing about public health that I've come to really appreciate is when it's going well, when you are doing the right things, you can't quantify how many lives you've saved. And the politics of that are the politics of that. I'm not thinking about any of that. All I'm focused on is saving lives. And I think we've done a lot of good work. It hasn't been easy. People have made sacrifice. But when over 3,000 people in Michigan have died from COVID-19, we've learned that this is something that could continue to spread if we weren't as aggressive. And that's why it's so important that we were.
I assume you are not on Mitch McConnell's page in suggesting the state should be able to file for bankruptcy. That's a correct assumption, right?
Yes.
So do you? I mean, Larry Hogan, as you might have heard a minute ago, told us he's going to have a $2 billion shortfall just by June or July, I think he said. I mean, how much money will Michigan need to make sure that the state is on firm financial footing in the immediate and in the long term?
Well, one of the things I appreciate about Larry as the head of the National Governors Association and a Republican, as well as my colleagues from across the country on both sides of the aisle, is we are doing everything we can to save lives in our state. COVID-19 was not brought upon because any of us or how we manage. It was brought on. It's a global pandemic. Many Americans have lost their lives because of COVID-19. Our economies are suffering because of COVID-19. And for any office holders to suggest that states should just declare bankruptcy is just absolutely the height of irresponsibility. Our woes here in Michigan are probably about $3 billion this year, maybe 3 to 4 next year, depending on how, what the next few months look like. And it's not because of anything other than COVID-19. And we have the lowest amount of money adjusted for inflation in Michigan since the Nixon administration.
Wow.
We need assistance. We need help. This is a unique time. None of us is happy to be here. We all have to pitch in and get this country back on track, and it's not through declaring bankruptcy. It's stepping up and giving the support where it's needed.
I mean, you're an astute observer of politics. You watch Congress. I mean, when you read the body language, when you talk to your delegation, are you at all confident that you're going to get what you need from the federal government?
I'm not going to take anything for granted. I think we've got a great delegation, Republican, Democratic alike, great leaders in the Michigan delegation have been really helpful throughout this process. I think we need, as state leaders, the flexibility to prioritize how we are expending these dollars. We've got students who've been out of school for a long time, and we're working incredibly hard to meet their needs. But our students are going to need additional wraparound support as we think about re-engaging in a traditional sense in the fall on the education front. Hopefully we can do that. But as we know, even from the federal government, we're hearing that we're going to still have to be in a very conservative posture when it comes to COVID-19 and avoiding a second spike in the fall. And so none of us knows precisely how this is going to play out. What we do know is that there's going to be an incredible amount of need, and the federal government, the state governments have to work together to meet that need.
You're a Democratic governor in a swing state who has an increasingly high profile. The president regularly takes shots at you. How have you found it best to handle his criticism and work with this administration?
So, President Trump won Michigan in 2016. a slim margin, but he won. I won in 2018 by almost 10 points. I never once talked about the president when I was running for governor. And I think that people in Michigan simply, we are good, hardworking people who expect our government to be as hardworking and as good as we are. And my focus has always been on trying to get help for the people of my state. That's why when these, slights come my way, I don't engage. I don't throw it right back. I don't return fire. I just try to stay focused on the things that I need to do to get to save lives here in Michigan and get the help that we need to do that.
Who have you found it useful to work with in this administration? I mean, Mike Pence was a governor. There's the president's son-in-law, who was previously worked in real estate, is involved in this effort. I'm curious who you found it most helpful to work with.
I'll say that the vice president has been really accessible and always cordial. He's been someone, I think, who, having been a governor, as you said, and being from the Midwest, I believe that we've been able to find some common ground quickly. I've found FEMA, the head of FEMA, also the head of Region 5, which is where Michigan is, to be great partners as well. HHS, the Army Corps. We've just really had a very good working relationship with our federal counterparts. So I think that that's something that's really important, that sometimes is hard to focus on when it appears otherwise from other vantage points.
One political issue that has arisen was around the hiring of a Democratic firm to survey Michigan residents for the coronavirus. You canceled that contract, and on Friday, some of the names were released of the individuals who did select that firm. Are you concerned about, Michiganders wondering how you're handling this and that politics are coming into play, or do people even really care about this when they're worried about their lives?
So, our Department of Health and Human Services it's a department full of hardworking public servants. These are not political people. They don't have a political bone in the collective body. They were making a decision on a vendor who they thought would be the best to oversee the contact tracing, And they made a decision. It really should have gone through the State Emergency Operations Center. When it came to my attention that this selection had been made, I canceled it immediately, not because it wasn't a firm that might be able to do the job, not because I have had the ability to ascertain every proposal that was sent to the state. I just know that this would be an unnecessary distraction, and we can't afford to have that. This contact tracing is an incredibly important part of our ability to identify where COVID-19 exists, how we continue to isolate the right people so that we don't have a second wave. We cannot afford any unnecessary distractions, and that's why I canceled the contract. And as we move forward, everything will be going through the appropriate process at the State Emergency Operations Center.
So you've some people have mentioned you as a potential presidential candidate, and I'm curious about your. I mean, you're going to get asked this probably every day for the next couple months. So describe your discussions with the Biden campaign and what kind of documentation you provided to them so far.
I haven't provided anything. And as of this conversation, I've provided nothing. I've had a good relationship with the vice president. He came and helped me a bit when I was running for governor. We're cut from a similar cloth. He loves people. He is, regularly checking in with me about what's going on here in Michigan. What do we need? I've gotten some counsel from him in terms of, just trying to communicate to people what we're really confronting, the seriousness of it, and the hope that we need to have, but also trying to connect in a way that people really understand we're trying to solve problems. And we know this has been a sacrifice, but we're going to get through this. And I think his counsel and friendship has been, and I think the way that he's had Michigan's back over the years is precisely why he resonates with people here. It's why I endorsed him before the primary played out here in Michigan. And I'm grateful for the friendship. And that's, everything that I'm doing right now is focused on helping the people of my state through this crisis. And that's all the energy that I have is going into that effort.
There's been a lot of discussion in Democratic circles about not only should the VP candidate be a woman, but does it need to be a woman of color? Where do you come out on that?
I think that there are some phenomenal women leaders across the country, and I will be the most enthusiastic supporter of Biden-whomever ticket. And, I would include people like Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren and Stacey Abrams and Amy Klobuchar, Val Demings. I think that there really is a great there's a huge class of highly competent women leaders across this country that would, I think, be fantastic.
How worried are you? I mean, you're following politics. Obviously, you've got the coronavirus right now, but how concerned are you that Joe Biden isn't kind of breaking through, or just that everybody is so hunkered down that he's not going to have some of those breakout moments that we typically see a candidate have to have some boost in momentum? Is that something you're concerned about as a Democrat?
No, it's not. I think right now, what we're seeing is a nation in crisis, and it's a difficult place to navigate, if you're running for office. However, I think that what people want and need to see right now is steady, thoughtful leadership that is focused on the American people. And whether it is through podcasts or it is through interviews, I think that comes through. I think people know Joe Biden. I think that's why you see numbers the way that they are without having all of that heavy, usual political presence that you would expect at this point in a cycle in a campaign.
This is a question that came up in preparing for this a bunch of times. I'm curious what your thought is. How do you run for vice president, you or any other governor or federal official, if you're managing a state in crisis, or if you're in a period of crisis? What does that look like? And is it even possible?
Beats me. I don't know. I mean, I'm not running for anything. I am
but somebody will be running for something, and that person might be a federal office holder. More than likely will be a federal office holder, right?
You know what? I don't know. I just know that, you don't run for that. That is a selection of the top of the ticket. And everyone else should be just busy doing their jobs.
All right. Well, we will leave it there, Governor. Thank you so much for taking the time this morning. We really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for joining us on the live stream, for kicking off your week here with the Politico Playbook interview. If you don't already get Playbook, you can subscribe by texting PB to 66866. Have a great week and stay safe.